I've just finished my first week back teaching kindergarten, and it's been completely joyful. But I have to tell you, I almost made a rookie mistake on day one. I had name writing overwrites ready to go, and then I remembered these were 4-year-olds. I'm sure many of you can relate. Teaching young children is a bit like herding cats, but it was completely joyful. And so today I want to share some moments and some experiences that I've had in the past week. The first one was me coming to my senses. I had those name overwrites laminated and ready to go with the whiteboard markers, the whole lot. And thankfully, I came to my senses because otherwise I would have ruined kindergarten in the first week for 13 children. And I mean, these were 4-year-olds. As I was looking at them, they were struggling to hold crayons and paintbrushes, and I was ready to teach them how to write their names. What was I thinking? I mean, so very luckily, and I'm very pleased with myself, that I actually shook myself awake and realized that this would have been a serious rookie mistake. But there are two things that happened that I want to share with you that were completely joyful and that really made this week. The first was we were outside playing, and in the area where we play, there were loads of acorns. And some of the children got really, really interested in these acorns and started collecting piles of them. And so I got a plastic bag and I suggested to this little boy that we would put these acorns into our nature tray when we were back in our learning space. And it's just a tray on the shelf, and I've got some other seed pods in there and a magnifying glass. So that's what we did. The next day, we were in the morning reading once again from the creation story. And so I was talking about what things are from nature and what are natural objects. And so I said, well, nature or natural objects are like the acorns we collected. They're seeds. And so I went about explaining how seeds fall on the ground and they're covered in soil, and then it rains and the sun shines. And I was doing this, of course, in my very best curiosity-inspired voice. And then a gigantic tree grows, like the gigantic oak tree we have in our play area. And I especially used the word gigantic because it was in the story, in the creation story that we had been reading. And so the next thing you know, these children are gathering round. And in this tray was also a pine cone. And one of the children picked up a pine cone and one of the seeds fell out. And I explained that these pine cone seeds have these little wings and they flutter to the ground like little helicopters. And then, of course, they're covered in soil and rain and sunshine. And they too grow into giant pine trees. Well, lo and behold, I then took one of these seeds and I dropped it from a height, and it fluttered down just as I had explained. And the squeals of delight surrounded the room. And the children just became so enthusiastic and excited. They were shaking the pine cones, getting the seeds out, looking with the magnifying glasses, coming up to me and saying, is this a seed? Is this a seed? They were completely fascinated with this whole idea of these seeds being planted and then, falling to the soil and then growing into ginormous trees. So that was the first moment of highlight. That was an absolute celebration of learning this past week. The next was a few moments before or after that, I can't quite remember now. One of the little girls, again about the creation story, piped up and said, when she came to school this morning, she saw the moon in the sky. And I just thought, wow. And I asked her, what was she wondering about that? And she responded, why was the moon and the sun in the sky at the same time in the day? And so I could have just applauded her intelligence. I could have just applauded her fabulous observation and left it at that. But I hopped up, grabbed a big piece of paper, and I wrote down her question. And so what we're going to do with that is that next week we are going to explore that question and go and do a little mini inquiry on that. And I'll get some books and we'll read about that and we'll explore Why do we see the moon in the daytime sky? And so these were just two little examples of how simple everyday moments that I could just have left. Those acorns could just have been left. I could have noticed, I could have said something, and that could have been that. I could have just acknowledged the child's observation about the moon in the daytime sky and left it at that too. Nothing could have happened. That would have been it. And I could have carried on with other stuff. Instead, I let my curiosity and my enthusiasm infect these children. And without any fancy resources, I used their fascination to spark curiosity and awe and wonder about the world around them. And so now the trick is, of course, not to just leave it there. I now have to go and use those moments in the coming weeks and turn those fascinations into rich learning experiences that these children are going to remember. And so as you go about your teaching next week, either in your homes or in your classroom, look out for those little moments where you can turn everyday curiosities into rich learning experiences for children, because they will be more likely to remember those than they're going to remember anything that you do, I don't know, on a worksheet or in a book. So as you go about your teaching next week, look for those little moments that you can go deeper and make learning come alive for children. And if you're interested in learning more about strategies that you can use to spark curiosity and make learning come alive for children, then my mini course, Professional Development, might be just what you're looking for. I'll leave a link for you in the show notes. That's it for today. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your support. If you found today's episode either interesting or informative, then leave a 5-star review for us. That would be awesome, and it'll help other people more easily find the show. So until next week, same time, same place, please stay blooming curious and take care of yourself.